All right, everybody. This is a retouching on price again. I had an earlier video, but I really didn't like the way it turned out. So this is just a bit better, in my opinion. So just as a bit of a recap, I got my axis, I got my price on my Y, got my Q on my X, supply line, positive slope, my demand line, negative slope, my determinants of supply, and go back and watch my demand video to recap the whole thing. But here's the short list of determinants that I use. Expectations, what do people expect for the future as far as consumers go? Income, how much money do my consumers have? Are they getting raises? Are they losing their jobs? That kind of stuff. Substitutes, can I exchange one thing for another? Beef instead of chicken, McDonald's instead of Burger King, that kind of stuff. Compliments, what do I buy with it? Coffee, donuts, burgers, fries. Preferences, is it popular or not? C, rise and fall of the career of Britney Spears. Demand is looking at things through the perspective of consumers, the people who buy goods and services in an economy or a market, however which way you want to look at it. Supply down here is looking at things from the perspective of producers, the people who make the goods and services. So technology. Improved technology typically involves more production. Government regulations. What rules do businesses have to follow when they're producing things? Number of sellers. How many people are in the market? How many people are selling burgers? How many people are selling cars? How many people are selling pedicures? Expectations. What do suppliers expect for the future? Are they expecting a good economy? Are they expecting a bad economy? Are they expecting their prices to rise? Are they expecting the prices to fall? What is going to happen? Cost of inputs. Go back and look at the 4 factors video if you need to. But this is what those are. The land, the labor, the capital. Specifically those 3. Just as brief go through. Land is anything found in nature plus the physical land itself. So, like, fish in the stream, that kind of stuff. Labor are workers and their skill sets. All right. So it's not just the meat bag that's doing the work, but what is the skills that they bring to the table? And then the capital. These are things made by people that enable them to make things. Tools, the short version. So, like a hammer, a computer, Amazon Mobile, anything that enables people to make things or enables them to provide a service, and that tool is made by people, that falls under capital. And then lastly, taxes and subsidies. This is kind of going back to government regulations, but this is more specific in the realm of how much money do they have to pay out to the government in the form of taxes? How much money are they getting from the government in the form of subsidies? Little different than regulations. All right, regulations are specific rules like child labor or not polluting the rivers, or you're not allowed to use human meat when you make chili, that kind of stuff. So, with that, right here is back to my graph. Now, first thing that I'm going to look for, I have my supply, I have my demand. You notice the 2 intersect right here. So this is what we call the equilibrium point. All right. So just to kind of mark that on my axi, if that's even a word. But I'll just have my equilibrium price, my equilibrium quantity. And again, this is the equilibrium point. This is where supply and demand will naturally balance each other out. Because what happens is if you are above, so I'll just mark price above equilibrium price, AEP, just as kind of to show this. If I'm above my equilibrium point, and I'm just going to run a dotted line just across to show that, you notice my supply is greater than my demand. So when my supply is greater than my demand at that higher price, I will have a surplus. All right. Now, what a surplus tells me is really 2 things. One, my prices are too high. And because my prices are too high, I have in essence now wasted resources. Okay? So I have made things that people are not buying. That's what's happened in a nutshell. Okay? Now, if my price is below equilibrium, and I'll just call this BEP, below equilibrium price, just for the sake of this example, what I will end up with, if you look, now with my demand is now higher than my supply. So now I have a shortage. All right, this is when I don't have enough. And this tells me two things. One, my prices are too low. And second, I need more resources. One of those two things have to happen. All right, so prices too low, need more. Specifically, not necessarily resources, but I need more product. All right. I can get more resources to kind of fix that a little bit, but better way of saying that is I need more product. What can I say? This is live. So this is what happens. So this is what price is meant to do. Naturally, what will happen is any economy, they will naturally trend towards equilibrium whenever possible. All right. So that is what happens. Okay. Now, so we're just going to move to one other little thing. So I'm just going to redraw my graph. Got my price, got my quantity. Make sure you always label those first. My supply line, my demand line, and then I'm going to show my equilibrium. There we go. Now, let's say hypothetically, I am graphing for, let's make this a real example. What could I do this? I can do video games. We'll just make this nice, sweet, and easy. So, I'm graphing for video games. And I say that the cost of game designers goes down. All right, so your game designers, the people who make the game, they're working for cheap. So, first thing to ask myself, there's a little scenario. I'm graphing for video games. The cost of game designers is now going to go down. So, my workers are now cheaper. So, first thing that I need to do is I need to look over here and ask myself, okay, which one of these falls under this? Expectations, income, substitutes, complements, preferences. If it's demand, if it is supply, will it be technology, government regulations, number of sellers, expectations, or cost of inputs, or lastly, taxes and subsidies? Now, the cost of my game designers has gone down. Is this going to affect how much people want to buy a game? Or will it impact how much it goes into making the games? Well, the game designers, the people who make the game, are now cheaper. Your labor is now cheaper, so that would fall under cost of inputs. So because it is cost of inputs, it is supply. So now this means that my supply line is actually going to shift. Now that my game designers are cheaper, that means that my game companies, the people who make the games, they can actually make more with less work. They can make more with cheaper workers. They can hire more workers because now their workers are cheaper. So now what you're going to see is this will be a shift of the supply line. Now the supply line is going to shift to the right, increasing the supply of video games. Because I can hire more workers, make more video games. So because of the shift, my equilibrium is going to change as well. So now I'm going to see at my new equilibrium, my price is going to go down, and my quantity of video games is going to increase. Because remember, right here, it's assumed that this is 0. And here at the top goes all the way to infinity, goes all the way to infinity here. So my equilibrium price has now gone down, and my equilibrium quantity has gone up. And now just a way to, oops, got to fix that one. So now, one thing that is that ties this all together, you notice S1, S2, supply 1, supply 2, equilibrium price 2, equilibrium quantity 2. Now, what is assumed? Even though I did not write it, it is assumed that there's a 1 here, here, and here. All right? It's just assumed that. It's assumed that each one, even though I did not write the 1 initially, it's assumed that these are 1. So your next shift should be 2. And again, the reason why you do this is to tie these things in together. Give D a 1 as well. So it's assumed that these are all tied together. So when you have the supply shift to the right, then you have the equilibrium. This caused this and this. That's really kind of it in short. So let's work another couple of examples real quick. So we just draw another graph. EP, EQ. And remember, even though I didn't write it, the 1 is still assumed to be there. All right. So now for a little another example. Oh, here's one. McDonald's raises their price for hamburgers. And what we're going to graph for are their fries. Okay? So, little scenario. McDonald's raises the price of their hamburgers. We're going to graph for the fries. Now, you walked into McDonald's and you saw that the burgers were now 50 bucks. Are you more likely or less likely to get their fries? Yeah, so this is what you're going to look at. So because this isn't about fries, what's happening, McDonald's just raising the price of their burgers, but you're graphing for the fries. So it has nothing to do with supply. Now it has more to do with demand. So you go to McDonald's, you see the burgers are 50 bucks. You go, you know what? I'm out of here. I'm going to Burger Sling. You will probably not buy the fries. So because that would fall under complements, because again, burgers and fries, you usually buy one, get the other. So that would be a complement. So because it's a complement, it is a change in demand. And I will show my new equilibrium. So because of that, my equilibrium price has gone down. My equilibrium quantity has gone down. And again, the reason for that is my determinant would be complements. Whereas this one, for the video games, was cost of inputs. Here's complements. Okay, let's do another one. set it up like always. And let me think. What is something I could do? What is something we could graph over? Okay, let's be a tad controversial. Workers. All right. So you have you allow child labor is allowed again. All right, so we pass laws, government passes laws that say, you know what, you can be 5 years old and you can get a job. In fact, you can go work in the salt mines and that kind of stuff. So government steps in, says, you know what, child labor is now legal. Now, which one? If you thought government regulation, you were right. There you go. So, because you have government regulation allowing little Timmy to go work in the factory and get turned into strawberry paste again. I kid. But, so, little Timmy can now work. Now what's going to happen to this? Because of that, it's supply. That would be an increase in the supply of workers, which would drag down their wages. So sad. And you got a lot more workers there now. So now you know the real reason why child labor went away, even though it was already going away before the feds did anything anyway. But yeah. So here's again three little examples. Now, something to always remember: if it is going to be any one of these, technology, government regulations, number of sellers, expectations, cost of inputs, taxes, and subsidies, that is going to cause your supply line to shift. All right. If it is demand, expectations, income, substitutes, complements, preferences, though, that is always going to cause a shift in demand. All right. Supply, demand. Supply, demand. You will never have a situation where an uptick in technology will cause the demand to shift. That's just not going to happen. All right. So these go together. These go together. They do not intermix with each other. All right. It's very, very important. And lastly, now this isn't about the determinants, but this is one last little thing to touch on. And it is the idea of price ceilings and price floors. My pen is dying. I'm going to have to replace this pretty soon. There we go. Price, quantity. Okay, this pin's dead. Grab another one. I kind of like this one better anyway. So, set this up. Got my equilibrium quantity, my equilibrium price. So, if price, we'll do a price floor first. All right. So, if the government steps in and institutes a price floor, classic example of this is minimum wage. Minimum wage is like the most classic version of a price floor that you will find the most. So what happens is government steps in, says, you know what, these people are not making enough money, therefore they should make more money. So the government will say, hey, this should be paid above the equilibrium point. All right. So government sets in a hard cap, or a hard floor actually. We'll just call this price floor. And what happens is, and the reason why we call this a floor is because this is off limits. So let's put some numbers to this. Let's say, hypothetically, just to make this easy, the equilibrium price for a specific job is $5 an hour. All right. So, but government comes in and says you have to pay them $7 an hour. Okay. So now what happens is, because I've raised the minimum wage, what have I created? I'm not allowed to go below the $7 mark. Anything below this is off limits. What have I done? Oh, I have now set a price above equilibrium. I'm not allowed to go below that. I have now created a surplus. All right. So if we're talking about workers, for example, so let's just say workers. Congratulations, I now have a surplus of workers. Surplus of workers that are not able to get a job because I am not allowed to pay them less. Pretty much how it goes in a nutshell. Now, the other side of this is a price ceiling. Supply, demand, EP, price, quantity. And price ceiling goes below the equilibrium point. All right. And the reason why we call this a ceiling is because this is off limits. Anything above that price ceiling is off limits. So I'm keeping it away from the equilibrium. Just like with the floor, keeps you away from equilibrium. Price ceiling keeps you away from equilibrium as well. So let's make this another example. Usually you'll find this with like products, goods, services, that kind of thing. So like, for example, you have a product, let's say a pack of water, not a bottle because it's a little much for a bottle of water, but let's just say like for a pack of water, the equilibrium price of that pack of water, that 6-pack of water, should be $5. But the government steps in and says, no, you are not, as a business, are not allowed to charge more than $3. So now I have the opposite. My demand is now higher than my supply. So because my demand is now higher than my supply, I have a shortage. A way to tell and make this a little bit easier to read is you can do this if you wanted to. This helps. Let's just see, PCD for price control demand, price control supply. So if demand is greater than supply, you have a shortage. There you go. Now, if I want to come over here, come back to the original one where I was doing the price floor, and I'll just call it PCS. PCD for price control demand, price control, I guess I could do per PF, that'll probably be a bit more specific. PFD, PFS, sounds like a bad restaurant, but if my supply is greater than my demand, I have a surplus. If my demand is greater than my supply, I have a shortage. Okay? Now these are usually government imposed. And the thing is with these, no determinants. All right, there's no determinants with a price ceiling or a price floor, because just the simple fact that it's a price control, it's already understood to be a government policy, but it's not necessarily a policy that is going to change anything. So like, for example, it's not a policy where they're forbidding children to work, or you have to fill out a bunch of paperwork in order to mine for oil or something, or drill for oil, or it's a not a regulation that is actually going to cost the business more money. This is just the government stepping in and saying, boom, this is it. All right. And yeah, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Um, any questions or anything like that, just let me know in the comments. And aside from that, I really have nothing left to say. I am out.